Leaked documents, redacted numbers, and a $63 million question nobody can seem to answer. What exactly is happening behind the polished image of the Invictus Games? Because this isn't just another charity headline anymore. This is something darker, something messier, something that refuses to stay buried. The moment those so-called leaked documents began circulating quietly at first, almost ignored, the entire narrative around Invictus started to crack. Not shatter, not yet, but crack just enough for people to peek inside and ask the one question that's now echoing everywhere: where is the money really going?
Two effing grifters. So
I just wanted to thank all of you for welcoming me into the Invictus family.
That number, $63 million, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It demands attention. It forces comparison. And once people started doing the math, once they realized what that figure actually meant per participant, the whispers turned into full-blown suspicion. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about honoring veterans anymore. It became about cost, scale, and something far more uncomfortable: accountability.
Somehow, this balloons from an event that cost $1 million the first year they did it to $63 million now. Harry has ballooned the budget from $1 million. It cost $1 million to do it with 400 people. It's now $63 million with an extra 140 people. What the
And here's where things start to feel off. Because according to those emerging details, while the total funding appeared to grow, the actual support reaching veterans seemed to shrink. A reported drop in grants, a rising pool of money, and no clear explanation connecting the two. That disconnect, that's where the controversy truly ignited, because people can accept high costs, but they struggle to accept confusion, especially when the cause is supposed to be crystal clear.
but people are a little upset about where the money is going, because right now there's been a 63% drop in actual grants to wounded warriors, despite the fact that they have more money in their bank than ever from carryover. And in Vancouver,
Then came the comparisons, and comparisons are dangerous because they don't just question, they expose. Other veteran-focused events operating at a fraction of the cost, millions versus tens of millions, smaller budgets, similar missions. And suddenly, Invictus didn't look grand, it looked excessive, it looked inflated, and people started asking the kind of questions that don't go away easily.
Prince Harry seemed to have left Scott Snow behind. Competed in 2023 Invictus in Dusseldorf. He was injured. He was in a wheelchair that did not have restraint straps, so basically defective hardware. It drives me crazy. I mean, Prince Harry founded these games. He's the public face of Invictus. And has anyone from his office bothered to reach out to you? Has anyone bothered to, from Invictus, after that initial meeting, bothered to reach out and say, hey, let's help out here?
I never heard from anybody, to be honest with you.
Why is this so expensive? Why are there redacted figures and documents that are supposed to represent transparency? Why do certain contracts seem incomplete? And more importantly, why now? Because timing matters. And this is where the story takes a sharper turn. These leaked details didn't appear in isolation. They surfaced right as new plans for future games were gaining momentum. New cities, new funding talks, new sponsorship pushes. And suddenly those old numbers didn't feel old anymore. They felt like warnings. And then the documents. Not clean, not clear, but fragmented. Pieces of information that don't quite line up. Mentions of payments without full descriptions. A company name appearing once, then disappearing the next year. Two different registration numbers tied to what should be one entity. Small details? Maybe. But in a financial story like this, small details are everything. Because it's not just about what's written. It's about what's missing. And the missing parts are what people are obsessing over. The redactions, the unexplained transfers, the silence around specific allocations. Every gap becomes a theory. Every unanswered question becomes a narrative. And hovering over all of it are Harry and Meghan, not directly named in any confirmed wrongdoing, not officially tied to any missing funds, but undeniably at the center of the storm, because this is their project, their legacy, their global stage. And when something this big starts attracting this level of scrutiny, distance becomes impossible. Now here's where it gets even more complicated, because behind the financial noise, there's another layer building quietly. Sponsorship pressure. future funding gaps, a growing urgency to secure millions more for upcoming games. And when money becomes urgent, every past expense suddenly matters more, because people aren't just asking where the money went, they're asking why more is needed, when so much was already spent. And just when it seemed like the financial questions couldn't get louder, they did. Because the deeper people looked into those documents, the more uncomfortable patterns began to emerge. Patterns that didn't scream scandal outright, but whispered something arguably more dangerous: inconsistency. Numbers that didn't quite align, timelines that felt rushed, and decisions that, when placed side by side, started to feel less like strategy and more like pressure. Because let's not forget, this isn't happening in a vacuum. While those documents were quietly being dissected, plans for future games were accelerating. Cities like Birmingham stepping into the spotlight, already facing financial strain, already dealing with budget cuts, and suddenly expected to host an event carrying the weight of a $63 million precedent. And that's when the tone shifted. This wasn't just about past spending anymore, it became about future risk. Taxpayer money entered the conversation in a very real way. Millions reportedly coming from government sources, public funds, public trust. And once that connection is made, the expectations change instantly. Because now the question isn't just where did the money go? It becomes who is responsible for explaining it. And explanations haven't exactly been clear, because every time a new detail surfaces, it seems to raise two more questions. Why were some financial figures redacted? Why do certain contracts appear incomplete? Why are some payments listed without clear purpose? These aren't accusations, they're gaps. But gaps in a story like this are where suspicion thrives. And then there's the timing again. Because as all of this is unfolding, there's a visible push for more funding, more sponsors, more global backing, a reported need for tens of millions more to secure future events. And that's where the tension reaches its peak. Because to critics, it starts to look like a cycle. Spend big, explain little, ask for more. And whether that perception is fair or not almost doesn't matter anymore, because perception is driving the conversation now. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, another uncomfortable narrative is quietly gaining traction. The idea that Invictus, once seen as a pure mission-driven initiative, is becoming something else entirely. A platform, a brand, a global spectacle where visibility and image sometimes feel just as important as impact. And every appearance, every speech, every carefully captured moment adds fuel to that perception. Because when cameras focus more on arrivals, outfits, and interactions than on the athletes themselves, people notice. When headlines shift from recovery stories to personality-driven drama, people question. And when financial scrutiny overlaps with that shift in attention, it creates a narrative that's hard to control. And at the center of that narrative, whether they like it or not, remain Harry and Meghan. Not because they've been proven to have done anything wrong, that line hasn't been crossed, but because they represent the face of the project, the symbol. And symbols carry weight, especially when the story around them starts changing. What makes this even more intense is the growing sense that this situation isn't finished. The documents that surfaced, they don't feel like a conclusion. They feel like a beginning, a first layer, a glimpse into something that could either fade away quietly or explode depending on what comes next. Because if more details emerge, if more inconsistencies are pointed out, if more funding requests collide with unanswered questions, then this stops being a temporary controversy and becomes something much bigger. Something that doesn't just follow Invictus, but defines it. And that's the real tension sitting underneath everything right now. Not just where the money went, but what happens next if the questions don't stop.